I'll try and keep my supplementary to the minute in fairness to the rest of the House. Specifically, Taoiseach, in relation to the shared dialogues, you mentioned hundreds of people have participated. Is it possible to get a specific number of how many people have taken part so far? You've addressed what issues will be discussed future. Is there scope to move to either blended or in-person dialogues? At what stage is this hoped for? And ultimately, what will the result of these shared dialogues be? Where will these reports go? Who will they be shared with? And more specifically on North-South relations, Taoiseach, many times we've talked about the importance of attendance at the North-South Ministerial Council, but I think equally it's extremely important for our own Minister for Health to meet with the Northern Irish Health Minister in person as soon as possible, and I'm calling you today to confirm that will happen.
Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.
Thank you. Thank you, Lascan Corla, and I think that point that Deputy Redmond has made around, Richmond has made around the North-South institutions functioning is absolutely essential. I see no good reason why the Health Minister would not meet with his Northern counterpart. I think that meeting should happen as a matter of urgency, but just to say more generally, and particularly in light of new leadership for the Unionist parties, we need to recall that all of the Good Friday Agreement institutions must work and work efficiently. So I would call on everyone to honour those commitments. Taoiseach, I had asked you about research commissioned by your department as building blocks for the work ahead. I think it's welcome that the research is happening, but I want to also mention to you other pieces of work that are being done. For example, the Royal Irish Academies, analysing and researching Ireland North and South. It's a project which complements work of the ESRI and NESC. The RIA, as you know, is an all-island body. It represents academics North and South, including those very much from a unionist background. It brings together evidence-based basis and research and questions of policy, and really contributes hugely to the public debate. Academics have said in different forms that the government seems intent on adopting a kind of Science Foundation Ireland funding model through research centres, and they don't believe that that's the right way to go about this, Taoiseach. So I think you need to give that some consideration.
Moving on, Deputy, they're not here. Deputy, let me just see. Deputy Alan Kelly, no. Deputy Mick, are you? Yeah, Deputy O'Riordan.
All right, am I not down on that list?
Is that? Yes, you certainly are. I didn't see you. Yeah, I just let because I've called him and I let you straight in. I didn't see you, Deputy. Yeah, it's hard to see. Deputy, go ahead. Yeah.
Taoiseach, we just want to ask, have you sought to meet with Edwin Poots since he became leader of the DUP? We are very much at risk of a further breakdown in relations. He is of the view that North-South relations have never been worse. Nicola Mallon of the SDLP has sought legal advice over the boycott of the DUP of the North-South Ministerial Council meetings. Have you received any advice on this yourself? The North-South Ministerial Council is a key part of the Good Friday Agreement.
Thank you, Deputy Richard Barrett.
Yeah, if we want to promote the merits of sharing the island, it's not just about initiatives from the top. It's about breaking down division and showing the value of unity and alignment from the bottom. And I gave you a concrete example of this a few weeks ago, Taoiseach. It was how taxi drivers affected by COVID in the north have been given a financial package of up to £3,000 sterling to deal with the overhead cost, the insurance costs, all the costs that they have built up and the debts they built up because of the loss of income incurred by COVID. And asked you, as the taxi drivers have done, to do the same down here. I understand you met with them this week, and still the government, despite vague promises, has committed nothing in terms of a financial package of support for an industry that has been decimated. As you know, Taoiseach, the taxi drivers are coming here, coming to Leinster House tomorrow in a large drive-by protest, and they have asked for a financial package of support for an industry that has been decimated by the industry similar to the one in the north. So let's start aligning north and south in a tangible way that means something to ordinary working people, and take a lead from a good example in the north of where a serious financial package was put in place for taxi drivers. Will you do the same in advance of this protest tomorrow for the taxi drivers and industry that have been so badly decimated down here?
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mick Barry.
So, Taoiseach, we often talk in this House about sectarian division. I want to say a few words about the exact opposite. Some weeks ago, workers at the Hovis Bakery in Belfast decided to take industrial action over the fact that they had been offered less than 2% of a wage increase this year. Catholic and Protestant stood united on the picket lines for 12 days of the strike, after which they won an 8% increase over 2 years, despite the fact that they had received pressure from the PSNI to disperse on grounds of COVID regulation. They organised their picket lines in a socially distanced and disciplined way and won their strike. They were visited on the picket lines by creche workers from Queen's University in Belfast, who've been taking various forms of industrial action since International Women's Day, the 8th of March, and this week who are escalating to a one-day strike. This is in opposition to unilateral changes in their working conditions, and you know, this is a bit of a theme here. COVID, again, being used as the excuse by the management to try and force through those changes. Workers stand in their way, workers are making their stand, and I just want to wish them well and to give solidarity greetings from the Socialist Party to both these groups of workers. They're an example to us all.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rose Conway-Walsh.
Thank you. Taoiseach, I welcome the ERSI conducting research on the economic and social opportunities from increased cooperation on the island, and I've read the scoping paper in detail, particularly the education section. We need to come away with a clear implementable actions and timelines that can be taken to increase North-South cooperation on third-level education. We've been conducting reports and carrying out research on cross-border cooperation since the Williams report in 1985, yet we've seen very little progress, particularly in student mobility. Since the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, the cross-border enrolment of students in third level on this island has remained unacceptably low. It's actually declined in the last 10 years by 18%. In the north, students from the south accounts for around 4% of the total student population, while in the south, the north make up less than 1%. And we must ask why. It takes the same time to travel to Belfast from Mayo as it does to Dublin or Cork. We know many of the reasons: the difference in admission systems, the inequity between A-level and Leaving Cert grades, the lack of information for students and teachers, particularly around access and supports. So I hope that the ERSI will be instructed to lay out practical measures and actions that the government can take to end this situation. I firmly believe that if we invest in an all-island educational system, we will not only see the benefits in terms of educational attainment, but in creating an understanding of the many cultures and traditions across our island.
Deputy Tobin, you wanted to come in. 1 minute.
Margaret, Taoiseach, yesterday the families and the representatives of the Ballymurphy massacre were at the Good Friday Agreements Committee in the Dáil, and they movingly told their experience of what happened to them. And it's interesting, the actions of the British murdering their citizens 50 years ago were the actions of a rogue state. The actions of the British in relation to stopping people finding out the truth in that intervening time were the actions of a rogue state. And now we have the British who are reneging on international agreements that they've just signed in the last number of years. Again, the actions of a rogue state. The question I have for you is, what legal advice have you got in relation to what this country can do in international law to force the British to adhere to the agreements that they have signed with this state and with the parties in the north of Ireland? For me, we should be bringing the full weight of international law on the British to make sure that they fulfil their responsibilities, especially for justice for victims. Gur Magat.
Thank you, Deputy. Now, Taoiseach to respond.
Yeah. First of all, Deputy Neil Richmond raised in terms of the specific number of in-person dialogues. I don't have that specific number with me here, but I can refer them to the Shared Island Unit, who will give an update to them and a briefing in relation to that. In terms of the North-South Ministerial Council and the need for full adherence to those meetings, that's something that we have been pressing and insisting, and we are being told that that there's no deliberate policy of non-attendance at some of the sectoral meetings, but that's something that we will continue to pursue and engage with the new unionist leadership on. In terms of the Royal Irish Academy, I think Deputy O'Donnell was, first of all, I would say that there's a broad range of research projects that we're funding too, and we're not committed to any one particular model. Yes, Science Foundation Ireland has done a lot of work with the UK Research Innovation Centre. That's important, and if we can develop really expanded levels of research and fund that, that would be good, involving North, South, and indeed East, West. That would be important. We've already funded a range of projects under the Irish Research Council, for example, which is, we're working with the Irish Research Council, which is obviously separate to Science Foundation Ireland. A funding call is presently open for academic contributions across two strands: political policy and economic cooperation, and civic, social and cultural connection and understanding on the island. Up to 10 research projects will be funded, starting this year and concluding in mid-2022 as part of the Irish Research Council's new Foundations programme. Okay, that's one area of it. The other area would be working with the Minister for Higher Education in terms of a competition for collaboration between consortia North and South around specific research issues that would be of mutual benefit to all on the island. And that's also being worked on. So it's a broader based approach to research that is envisaged, and we're open within the Shared Island Unit, and I'm open to good quality proposals. We do want to see an element of competition for the research funding, and there has to be a strategic approach adopted in terms of the value of the research programme as well. And there's a whole range of topics from cybersecurity to biodiversity, right across the board to technology and so on. And in terms of meeting with the new union's leadership, we are pursuing that, and we will engage in relation to that. And also, in terms of the broader issue that I think Deputy Tobin raised there, in terms of adherence to the Good Friday Agreement and to all strands of the Good Friday Agreement, I think dialogue is the most important and most effective mechanism, as we've learned over the years. That said, within the European framework, Europe is already taking legal action in respect of unilateral actions taken by the UK government in respect of the commencement dates around the protocol. But nonetheless, there is a process now in place between Mara Sefcovic and David Frost in respect of the adherence to an international agreement that has been arrived at by the British government with the European Union, which includes Ireland. In respect of the Good Friday Agreement, we believe that the dialogue is the most effective route right now in respect of dealing with that. And also, and that's exactly what I'm saying, and Stormont House Agreement comes under that point, and the aegis of that there can be no unilateral action in relation to Stormont House. There has to be full engagement with all of the parties, and indeed with the two governments. And that is the Irish government's approach to that, in terms of justice for victims, justice for the families of the victims of the Ballymurphy massacre, and a range of other issues right across the board. And that's a matter of further discussion. In terms of Deputy Boyd Barrett, I did meet with the taxi drivers last week, and had a good, constructive, lengthy meeting with them, and will be reverting back to the minister responsible and to government in respect of the issues that were raised there. One can compare like in terms of supports in the north compared to the Republic. Your suggestion that nothing has been given here is wrong. There has been a range of supports that have been provided. The issue is the scale, quality and quantity of those supports, and whether more can be done. And my view is we have to work to do more for taxi drivers to try and facilitate them, particularly as the economy and society is reopening, that we can deal with the very specific issues that they have and that are specific to their industry. And we'll be doing that, and Deputy McBarry raised in a spirit of solidarity with the workers in the bakery in Belfast, and indeed in the creche workers in Queens. And again, I wish that first of all, the bakers got their resolution, and I welcome that, and that they successfully, activated for improvement in their conditions and pay, and creche workers also, that we wish that their issue can get resolution. That covers Deputy Conway Walsh in terms of the education, the SRI research. Again, the SRI research covers both cross-border trade and services on the island of Ireland, and the structure and composition of that cross-border trade. That's work that's underway. Then it's going to compare the primary healthcare systems of Ireland and Northern Ireland and draw out implications for policy. The SRI generally do the analysis, do the research, implications for policy formulation, and then decide. It's up to government then and other agencies to decide in terms of implementation. On education, the issue really is they're going to compare the patterns of educational participation and attainment in the two jurisdictions and assessing what lessons can be learned for the future. It is my view that one area that has not received the attention that it should have received over the last decade has been participation rates in third level from all communities, and particularly from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities in Northern Ireland, and the levels of second level completing secondary schools. And in some significant socioeconomic disadvantaged areas, the progression onto further education and onto third level has been far too low. And there needs to really be a very substantive programme developed by the two governments, in my view, with the Northern Ireland Executive, to deal once and for all comprehensively, and it'll take time, with the issue of educational disadvantage in the north. And some communities who had historically relied on traditional forms of employment, whether it's shipbuilding, textiles, or whatever, they haven't quite made the same adjustment that has been made in other parts of the island in respect of areas that suffered similar adjustments in an earlier period, but managed to bring technology and other new industries in, but also developed educational opportunity. And I think that is very key, and I look forward to the ESI report in that regard. It's not so much saying, okay, can we create an all-island system? I mean, there's an education system within the north. I think we can seek greater complementarity. I've already, 7 or 8 years ago, put forward proposals around curriculum complementarity, for example, the English curriculum. History, can we develop shared narratives around history and certain history areas of study? And then also in terms of qualifications, which in terms of facilitating progression, north and south to various third level institutions. And I think that has worked over the years, that can be improved upon. Particularly given the changes this year in respect of admission to Scottish universities in third level and the costs that will now apply to Irish citizens in particular, there will be implications there for places here. But I think we're looking at potential tie-ups between colleges, north and south, and maybe institutions working together commonly on certain programs and projects, whether it's McGee and Letterkenny, and McGee and others, Queen's and others, and other institutions. And the ESRI is then looking at factors that could enhance the attractiveness of the island as a whole to high value foreign direct investment and identifying opportunities for greater cooperation and policy coordination. Now, as part of the Shared Island Fund, we are looking at funding and being part of the City Deals project, which is around investing in industrial parks, both on the Derry side and on the Donegal side, with a view to combining the various assets, be it the skilled labour force, the FDI attractiveness of the southern side. Can we develop more FDI jobs in the overall northwest region and look at it as a region? And can we be facilitative of that? And I think the investment in those parks will certainly be a very important development, and we look forward to the SRI's work in relation to that.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now we'll move on to the next question. It is in the name of Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, and that's grouped with a number of questions.
Sorry, I ask Concordia Post to take questions 10 to 14 together. Matters relating to arts, culture and equality are dealt with by the Cabinet Committee on Social Affairs and Equality, and this Cabinet Committee last met on the 30th of November and will meet again shortly. I have regular engagement with Ministers at Cabinet and individually to discuss priority issues relating to their departments. In addition, a number of meetings have been held between my officials and officials from relevant government departments since the establishment of the Cabinet Committee in July 2020. The impacts of the pandemic across all areas, including arts and culture, and particularly arts and culture, has been considered by the Cabinet Committee on COVID-19. And as the successful vaccination programme allows us to progressively reopen the economy, the economic recovery plan will set out how we will support the full resumption of economic activity and get people back to work. And in particular, we will be looking at the arts and culture sector, and has been a consistent part of the agenda of both the COVID-19 subcommittee and also the economic recovery subcommittee of the Cabinet, where we've worked in terms of what types of supports can we provide to the arts and the culture sector and entertainment sector, what specific supports can we give them, and how do we facilitate their return now as society opens. The Cabinet Economic Recovery Plan and the Cabinet Subcommittee will be dealing obviously with broader labour market enterprise supports. We've been clear there will be no cliff edge, and also, as I say, in terms of the live events and arts and culture, how we continue to support those sectors in addition to investing in infrastructure and reforms that enhance our long-term capabilities. And in making those considerations, sectors such as live events and arts and culture reliant on mass gatherings will be given consideration and strong consideration.
And Taoiseach, with respect to the work on equality, I want to ask you about the report just published by the Children's Ombudsman, No End in Sight. And in that report, traveller children talk about their living conditions. They describe their living conditions as hell. Traveller children talk about their living conditions and say that they feel, because of them, that they feel as if they're like garbage. The report exposes severe violations of children's human rights due to insecure, unsafe and uninhabitable accommodation. The report lists rat infestation, damp conditions, lack of sanitary facilities, lack of heating as among the very serious concerns that it details. So Taoiseach, I want to ask you, what action are you taking to address the very severe housing problems faced by traveller families and traveller children in particular, and these very serious violations of human rights detailed in the report?
Thank you. Reardon.
Gamargadas Concordia, Taoiseach, myself and Senator Ivana Bacik have been advocating for quite a while for a catch-up fund for children in terms of the school year next year. You will know of the scarring and the damage that has happened to young people and to children, particularly disadvantaged children, over the last period of time, last year or so, because of the lack of in-school tuition. There is a huge sum in the UK, 1 billion fund. What you have allocated is around 40 million in terms of a summer programme. Can you speak to the necessity for a catch-up fund, and can you also speak to the necessity for schools, all schools, to retain their teaching class, their teaching levels, their post levels? Because I'm aware of a school in Ardfert outside Tralee which is losing a teacher, a number of other schools who are contacting me about losing teachers. Isn't it time for a moratorium on all schools losing teachers, just so we can repair the damage that was done to children and young people over the course of the last year? Not the government's fault, of course, but we have to invest in order to drive down class sizes and to ensure that whatever scarring took place, and it was substantial, the damage that took place can be invested and overcome and repaired.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett.
Taoiseach, income and employment insecurity and very often downright poverty is the reality for many of the people who work in the arts sector in this country, a fact highlighted even more so during COVID. So firstly, Are the government going to do the pilot on basic income for people working in the arts? Secondly, recently we've had reports, good news reports, story about the Disney production Enchanted. However, other reports suggest the film might more accurately have been called Disenchanted when it comes to some of those who are actually working on it. Reports suggest, for example, that many of the performers and the dancers found themselves being paid less and being denied the residuals, i.e. royalties, for their work on the film in an industry agreement, so-called, which is basically shocking compared to the position and conditions that those performers enjoy in films made in Britain and elsewhere. Also, stage crew from the Irish Film Workers Association, who'd actually worked on Enchanted 1, this is Enchanted 2, were actually picketing outside Disney because they've been blackballed by the Irish producer company who's received tens and tens of millions of Irish taxpayers' money, but are not employed on the subsequent film because essentially they raised questions about their lack of security of employment.
Deputy Breed-Smith.
Margaret, Taoiseach, I assume if you drive back and forth from here to Cork, you frequently pass through the area of Inchicore, which is in this constituency of Dublin South Central. It's a great area to live in. However, the constituency of Dublin South Central has one of the deepest socio-economic disadvantages in the country. And in Inchicore, there is a service there for people with mental health difficulties that's been in the area for 28 years. About 80 to 100 people pass through its doors each week. And it is a vital service, particularly for local youth and schools and family support. It's already in the heart of a deprived area, and yesterday they received a phone call to tell them that the service is shutting down. It's called Hesed House. The HSE have withdrawn the funding, and this is going to be such a blow to all of those people. In fact, I think it will drive them back years, and the staff are deeply concerned for their users, but we as representatives are deeply concerned for all of them, the users and the staff, and young and old will be pushed back many years and will lose faith in a system that has frequently and repeatedly said over the last year that as we go from lockdown to reopening, we have to look at the damage lockdown and what it has done to people's mental health. Every minister in this House, including yourself, talk frequently about the mental health of our population, and here is a prime example of mental health which is being helped on a regular basis by volunteers and workers in the community and has now just had the rug pulled from under it. Taoiseach, will you comment on that, and please intervene to save the service
Deputy
of Hesed House in Inchicore.
Deputy McBarry.
Taoiseach, Monday's report from the Ombudsman for Children's Office into conditions at a traveller halting site in Cork City found that 66 children at the site were forced to live in conditions that were filthy, overcrowded, damp and rat infested. The report, undertaken on foot of a complaint submitted by the Cork Traveller Women's Network and the Traveller Visibility Group as a last resort after years of campaigning, concluded that Cork City Council had failed to comply with the minimum requirements of the law, had acted in a discriminatory fashion and had violated the human rights of the children. Social Affairs correspondent of the Irish Times, Kitty Holland, described the report this morning as, quote, the strongest report on children's human rights abuses in Ireland that she had read in 2 decades in journalism. The Cork City Council is the landlord, and Cork City Council have the power to resolve these problems. Your party is part of the ruling group on that council. The message that urgent action now needs to be taken needs to be driven home to the council officials and to every elected member of that council. To that end, Taoiseach, I would ask you to make a statement here on the matter and to perhaps consider making a visit to the site in question in the weeks ahead.
Thank you. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.
Taoiseach, you might be aware that the Oireachtas Disability Group have highlighted the data deficit and the limited evidence on unmet needs of people with disabilities. and their concerns are well founded as government departments plan for another budget without the data needed to properly inform budgetary decisions crucial to the lives of citizens with disabilities. So I want to ask you about two reports, Taoiseach, which are outstanding and that will go some considerable way to address this data deficit. The first is the Department of Health's Disability Capacity Review, which was due to be published by the previous government. And the second is a report, research from Indicon, commissioned by the former Minister for Social Protection, actually 2 years ago, to consider the cost of disability. That report was due to be completed last year, and yet the current minister confirmed last week that it still hasn't been received. So the delays in these publications aren't academic matters, they're very, very serious. I want to ask you, Taoiseach, if you can reassure all of us that both reports will be published and published in good time to help inform a budget that I hope on this occasion will in fact do justice and recognise the very considerable needs of our citizens with disabilities.
Taoiseach to conclude.
Sorry. First, Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, I think, made the first point in terms of the report, no end in sight. First of all, it is the report is a shocking indictment on all concerned in terms of the failure to develop plans for both the halting site itself and housing, which will be needed to deal with all of the residents. That site is far too overcrowded. There's been many issues with that site for a long time. In my view, the Council needs to take action and take decisions and implement them. And not everybody will be satisfied with those decisions, and not everybody will be happy with those decisions. But my understanding is, and I will be reverting back to the Council on this, that my understanding is there's been lots of different initiatives and plans produced over time, but they haven't brought a resolution. And the consequence of that failure to get a resolution to a lot of the issues is children living in absolutely unacceptable conditions in terms of health, hygiene, quality of life, and so forth. And it's absolutely unacceptable. The local authority will have to move now decisively in response to the Ombudsman's report. In terms of Deputy O'Riordan's point about catch-up funding for schools, I think the 40 million allocated for the summer is a good initiative. It's an expanded initiative, primarily dealing with special needs provision during the summer months, but also for children who've been educationally disadvantaged because of COVID. Now, I would also look, I think the Minister is looking at the next academic year, next school year, with a view to integrating additional supports to support, again, students who may have fallen behind or who need additional supports arising out of the impact of COVID-19. It is a very important issue, it's a very serious issue, and the Minister is taking it seriously. The Minister has also taken a benign approach to school enrolments, or the allocation of teachers generally to schools across the country. And many have retained teachers. Of course, the pupil teacher ratio was reduced in the last budget, which was a significant move in itself. It was fulfilling a commitment we had made in the programme for government, and something that we were very anxious to get movement on quickly. But again, we will look at education in a favourable light, notwithstanding the challenges facing us from a budget perspective, as we hopefully continue our cautious and significant reopening of society. Obviously education is critical. I think we showed our prioritisation of education by getting our schools back last September. Huge effort made by all of the teams in schools, from the parents to the teachers to the SNAs to the school staffs, principals, ETBs, right across the board, and the communities all wishing them on. We got hit with the third wave, got the schools back up again, and now we've got to make sure we can settle it down in the next school year, both in terms of giving the kids every opportunity they possibly can to grow and develop and overcome the impact whatever negative impact COVID might have had on quite a number of students, and I've no doubt it had, in terms of their development, in terms of their overall well-being, and in terms of education and attainment itself. Deputy Boyd Barrett, in terms of the arts sector, yes, it's a sector that Minister Catherine Martin is working on in terms of the universal, the idea of a basic income, and doing some more work in relation to that with other government departments and social protection to see the type of scheme and framework that could be developed. And also, I don't have the specifics in terms of the working conditions or the pay and the various paying conditions that apply to the Enchanted Disney production. But again, there may be an alternative view to the one that you've articulated here, and I'm conscious of that. Quite a number of times you do make observations that others who don't have a chance to defend themselves or respond don't often get that chance. So I don't know what, if there could very well be an alternative narrative to the one that you've described. But suffice to say that all the regulatory frameworks governing pay and conditions should be adhered to. All of the basic conditions that the state insists on should be adhered to. There's no excuse in productions of this kind for workers or artists or dancers to be left shortchanged. That shouldn't happen. Because the purpose of such investments and the facilitation of films and so on in Ireland is to provide quality employment to people working in the arts right across the board.
Not happening.
From sound technicians right across to those who are acting, those who are dancing, those who are performing. And that should apply. And again, I'll ask the various authorities and I'll ask the Minister to investigate that and have a look at that, to assess it and make its own analysis of what has happened here. In terms of Deputy Breed Smith, I will look. Not familiar with the specific service in terms of the decision by the HSE to withdraw funding. Again, I'm not sure, are there particular local or specific issues as to why the HSE is withdrawing funding. We have provided additional funding to the HSE this year for mental health services, so it shouldn't be an issue of funding, but there may be other issues. But I will ask the Minister for Health and the Minister for Mental Health, Mary Butler, to check this out and to work with the deputies and Oireachtas members, generally senators and deputies, with a view to seeing what can be done to make sure that services can continue for those users of that particular service, and to look at what is the story here. Why has this occurred right now in the middle of COVID? Because we've provided additional funding. We've given additional funding to mental health over and above. And in fact, in one of our earlier announcements this year, we allocated an extra 10 million for mental health. So, and particularly for community initiatives. So I don't see why that has happened here, and I don't have the specific details of the specific centre. I think you'll appreciate that. Deputy, I will, yeah. Thank you. I'll ask my officials to immediately contact the HSE in relation to this, and I'll talk to the Minister in relation to it.
Thank you.
Deputy Barry raised again the 66 children living in appalling conditions at a halting site, I think. And I would say that that has to come to an end. But all parties to this have to agree to the decisions that the Council will take on this. And all parties will have to agree to the various proposals that have been put forward in the past. And we need cohesion, we need unity of approach now in relation to getting this issue properly from a human rights perspective, but just for the basic well-being of the children concerned and the families concerned, that the initiatives in response to this, that they're agreed to and brought through, because it's not acceptable at all that this level of deprivation and lack of access to basic living conditions would be denied. And also there's a very strong health and safety dimension to this, which I think would cause me great concern. And we've had very tragic circumstances in the past in respect of loss of life at halting sites where health and safety was just not what it should be. And I do believe there's an imperative here to get this issue sorted once and for all. Because children should not be residing, or anybody shouldn't be residing in circumstances that are so poor in quality of life dimensions, but also critically in terms of health and safety. and that's very important. And by the way, Deputy, there's no ruling group on Cork City Council. You served on it yourself, Deputy Barry, before you became a TD, and you're well aware of the issue. And you've been on the council as well, and this is an issue that I think we can all agree should be dealt with. Deputy MacDonald raised the issue of the Oireachtas Disability Database Group. Again, when I was last in government, I can say to the Deputy there was a very comprehensive disability intellectual database, which provided very good information, which informed government decisions and allocation of resources, and likewise for physical and sensory. That was developing at the time. That seems to have weakened over the years. I do believe that we do need more proper data to inform the provision of services. We also need to look at how services are provided into the future, in my view, both from the health and education aspect, particularly for people with disabilities and children with special needs.
Thank you.